Parshas Achareimos Kedoshim. This week is sponsored lizchut גיטל bas Rivka. The truth is, in these parashas, Achareimos and Kedoshim, there's absolutely tons of mitzvahs that we could potentially cover. But I'm going to focus on one particular mitzvah because I want to expound on it and touch on a theme that also has to do with preparation for Shovuos. So it all flows from this pasuk. Parshas Kedoshim, the pasuk goes like this: Mepnei seva tokum, v'hadarto pnei zakein, v'yoresa me'elokecha ani Hashem. So essentially, there seems to be three parts to the pasuk. Mepnei seva tokum, you stand up in front of older people. V'hadarto pnei zakein, you should show deference to a zakein. V'yoresa me'elokecha, and you should also fear Hashem. So firstly, who is the Zokein that we're talking of in this pasuk? The Gemara in Kedoshim Lamed Beis tells us, Rabbi Yiddishkeit says, Ein Zokein elo mi shekana chochma. Shenema Hashem kanoni reishis darkoi. A Zokein means someone who has acquired wisdom. Acquiring wisdom gives a person a title of Zokein. And when the pasuk says you've got to show deference, you've got to show respect to a Zokein, says the Gemara in Kedoshim, it means someone who has acquired wisdom. We might call such a person a Talmid Chacham. Now, Chinuch in Mitzvah Reish Nun Zayin, he explains why it's so important to give kavod, to give honor to a Talmid Chacham, to someone who's acquired Chachma. And he writes as follows: Lefi she'ikar hayosa adam nivra ba'olam hu mipnei hachachma. The main reason why a person is made into this world, was brought into this world by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is because of Chachma. What does that mean, says the Chinuch? Kedei sheyake boiroi. In order for a person to recognize HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Al kain, therefore, says the Chinuch, Roi lebnei adam lechabed mi shehisig oisa. It's appropriate for a person to be machabed, someone who has acquired wisdom, because ultimately we are here in this world to acquire wisdom. And if a person shows honor to somebody who's acquired wisdom, says the Chinuch, he would inspire others also to seek out wisdom. Of course, there's the famous Gemara, I think it's famous, Chav Beis Amud Beis in Makkas, where Rava exclaims, how silly there are people in this world. They will stand up in front of a Sefer Torah, but they won't stand up in front of a Gav Rabbah, in front of a Talmid Chacham. We all revere a Sefer Torah, quite obviously. We all understand that a Sefer Torah requires a respect. But Talmid Chacham, for some people, no, has somewhat of lesser significance. And what this pasuk is telling us is the chiyuv that we have is to show honor to people who acquire Chachma, to show honor to a Talmid Chacham. There's a story I saw this week from Rabbi Galinsky, who describes a Simchas Torah where, unfortunately, in the middle of a dancing, due to the exuberance of dancing, the Netziv fell down, and with his fall also fell the Sefer Torah. So on the floor, unfortunately, there was the Heilige Netziv and a Heilige Sefer Torah. And Reb Itzla Mivalozhin, who was there, instructed one of the Bachrim to first help the Netziv to his feet, and only afterwards take care of the Sefer Torah. Afterwards, he was questioned on this. Reb Itzla responded simply in Yiddish, "Er is a lebedik Sefer Torah." You don't just have one Sefer Torah on the floor; you got two. The Netziv was a live Sefer Torah. So of course you take care of that first. We must honor, says the pasuk, a Zokein, a Talmid Chacham. Fine. So far so good. But what about the last part of the pasuk? V'yoresa me'elokecha ani Hashem. Why is that so integral to this pasuk? Why is it here? So the Gemara in Kedoshim, which Rashi brings, poses, who is this pasuk directed at? Says the pasuk, says the Gemara, Yochel ya'atzim einov k'mi shelo yiro. You may think, you see a Talmid Chacham, you don't really want to give them respect, so you can close your eyes and pretend as if you haven't seen him. Good old childish sort of attempt to avoid seeing something. Close your eyes, you haven't seen it. Close your eyes, you haven't seen him. Says the Gemara, Talmud Loimad Tokum V'Yoresa Dova Mosul Alev Nema B'Yiras Shomayim. The Rebbeinu Shalom knows what's going on, and the Rebbeinu Shalom knows all your shtikelach. If you close your eyes and pretend not to see the Talmud Chacham and thereby avoid honouring him, the Rebbeinu Shalom will know. But still the Gemara presses further. Otu B'Rashi Askinon. The Pasuk is addressing Klal Yisrael as if Klal Yisrael would be wicked. What, you're telling me that you're going to see in front of you Talmud Chacham, a Zokin, and you're going to just close your eyes and pretend he's not there? Is that what we're talking of, says the Gemara? No. The Gemara says, maybe he'll close his eyes. Mekamed delimti zeman chiyuva. He'll close his eyes before this man chiyuv even comes upon him. What does that mean? The Gemara clarifies. You only have to show honor to Talmud Chacham lahalocha if you enter within the 4 amos radius of the Talmud Chacham. So you're about to enter into the 4 radius of 4 amos. You're not yet mechuyev to show the person honor. And what you do at that point is you close your eyes. At that moment, you've removed yourself from the chiyuv because you can't see the Talmud Chacham now. Even if you were to get into his zone, you can't see him. On that, the Gemara says, the Pasuk comes to tell us, V'yareisam elekecha. That's from Yiras Shomayim. You have to realize the Rebbeinu Shalom knows jolly well what you're up to. No one else is going to know why you step this way, why you step that way, who you're avoiding, if you're avoiding. The Rebbeinu Shalom knows everything. That's why the Pasuk concludes this mitzvah of showing honor to Talmud Chacham with the statement, V'yareisam elekecha. You should know that the Rebbeinu Shalom knows whether you're trying to honor or whether you're trying to run away from the honoring Talmud Chacham, closing your eyes, pretending not yet mechuyev, etc. The Rebbeinu Shalom knows everything. Fine. I think so far, so good. But Reb Eli Lopian comes along and he draws what I consider to be a very powerful principle from this pasuk, from this Gemara. Because if you think about it, there's a question, a glaring question on what we just said. What's so wrong that a person who's not yet mechuyev to honor a Talmud Chacham, because he's not yet within his 4 amos, closes his eyes and arranges that he shouldn't enter the Talmud Chacham's zone? In other words, he arranges for himself not to become mechuyev. Is it so bad? He's not mechuyev. He's not yet in the zone of 4 amos to honor the Talmud Chacham. Says Rav Elia, what the Gemara is teaching us is the fact that it says in the Pasuk, V'yareisam elekecha. And the V'yareisam elekecha is telling us, don't avoid a situation where you could have put yourself in a situation which would have made you mechuyev b'mitzvah, even though you're not mechuyev yet. Says Rab Elia, Vaistois, you see from here that one who avoids putting themselves into situations of mitzvahs, they simply have no Yiras Shomayim. They are lacking in the V'yareisam elekecha. Whereas the contrary, the person who puts themselves in a situation where they are mechuyev b'mitzvah, says Yiras Shomayim. That's Yiras Shomayim. And the truth is, Rav Elia draws this from the Gemara we just said, but the Rashi on the Gemara says, V'yareisam elekecha, says Rashi, you must have Yirah from the Yotzer, from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who knows your thoughts, that you may seek tricks in order to become potter from the mitzvah. And the Rebbeinu Shalom knows what we're playing at. Rav Hashem knows if we're trying to be an Oibach Chacham and avoid doing the mitzvah. Says Rab Elia, avoiding becoming mechuyev in a mitzvah is a lack of Yiras Shomayim. And he then quotes a Rabbeinu Yonah, again, further putting meat on the bone to this point, this principle. Rabbeinu Yonah Shari Tshuva Gimel Yud Beis. First, Rabbeinu Yonah says there's a mitzvah aseh of Yiras Shomayim. To have Yiras Shomayim. Where's the mitzvah aseh? Where's the makor? Our pasuk. V'yareisam elekecha. Have Yiras Shomayim. Seemingly an innocent sentence. But says Rabbeinu Yonah, if you look into Tehillim, psukim that we know very well, David HaMelech says, Yiras Hashem elamedchem. I'm going to teach you Yiras Shomayim. And you know what the pasuk carries on with, says Rabbeinu Yonah? The next pasuk, sur meira, va'asei tov, bakesh shalom, v'rodfeu. So in other words, David HaMelech is saying to us, I'm going to teach you Yiras Shomayim, and then he lays it out. Don't do bad, do good. Seek peace. Chase it, chase peace. Says Rabbeinu Yoino, Lamadnu mizeh, we can learn from this proximity of the two psukim, we can learn from here. Ki mi she'einoi oisek ba'asiyas ha'toiv v'bakoshas sholom hofe Yiras Shomayim. Someone who does not actively engage in pursuing good, he lacks Yiras Shomayim. And then Rabbeinu Yoino says words which are so sharp. V'hu min ha'reshoim. And he is of the wicked ones. Ki loi yorei Elokim. What's being said over here, what Reb Elia is building as a Yesod, which Rabbeinu Yoina again says it black on white, which we can draw from this pasuk and the accompanying Gemara, is that you think, as long as I'm doing mitzvahs and not doing averos, it's good enough. The fellow in our story, which the Gemara is describing, hadn't yet become mechuyev to honor the Talmud Chacham. So, according to the strict letter of the law, he was all right, continuing to avoid the Talmud Chacham, not to enter the Daled Amos, closing his eyes as to avoid becoming mechuyev. You might have thought that's all right. Not good enough. Yiras Shomayim doesn't mean avoiding averos. Yiras Shomayim doesn't even mean just doing mitzvahs. Yiras Shomayim means engaging with potential opportunities for mitzvahs, pursuing them. Bakesh sholom v'rodfeu. I want to clarify something here, which I find very illuminating regarding Yiras Shomayim, because when people talk, when I have heard people speak about Yiras Shomayim, people can really tie themselves up in knots. There's so many questions. Yiras Shomayim, what does it mean to have Yiras Shomayim? And what about Avas Hashem? How does Ava work with Yira? When you talk about Yira, what do you mean? Do you mean Yiras Oynish, Yiras Achareimos? You can make a cholent and a chicken soup all out of what it means Yiras Shomayim and end up spinning around without any clarity as to how to live your life differently. What I believe this Reb Elia and this Yesod does for us is it makes it very, very simple. You know what it means to have Yiras Shomayim? It means to care. Do you care about your Yiddishkeit? Do you care about your halachas? Does it matter to you to get it right? Does it matter to you to find out I had a conversation with someone last week, and he, by the by, told me a conduct that he does with Kedoshim. Doesn't matter what it was. He did something which was deloy halacha. And when he told it to me, I looked at him a little bit strangely. And I said to him politely, have you checked that one out? And he said to me, no, I haven't asked a Rav. So I looked at him with a little bit of a critical eye, and it was understood from what I was saying that he really ought to ask a Rav. And he said, mild to me, he said, I'm trying to avoid asking the Rav that question. In other words, he jolly well knew the answer. That's the difference. That's the difference. Someone who seeks engagement in Torah mitzvahs versus someone who takes a more of a laid-back approach. It's a matter of Yiras Shomayim. So this has given us a practical sense of what it means to have Yiras Shomayim. It's a sense of how much it matters to you. And Rav Shimshon Hirsch, on this pasuk, takes this aside, he twists one more dial, one more even further. And he says, it could even be that a person doesn't avoid outright honoring a Talmud Chacham. It could be that a person actually goes and bows and his head or stands up from his chair to honor the Talmud Chacham. In action, a person actually goes ahead and honors the Talmud Chacham. It says that Rav Shimshon Hirsch, and I know it's Hebrew translated from his original German, but he writes, but in his heart, this guy, although he's on the outside seemingly respecting a Talmud Chacham, inside he's burning with hatred and with dismay. Al kein nema v'yoreisam elikecha, says Rav Shimshon Hirsch. Haboichen levovois. Rebbeinu Shalom will know jolly well what's going on inside our heart. You think you can play games because you're standing up to honor Talmud Chacham as if that somehow translates in Shomayim with anything real. Says Rav Shimshon Hirsch, v'yoreisam elikecha means the Rebbeinu Shalom will check us out. And we'll see how genuine and how sincere it is, that honor that we are according to the Talmud Chacham. Sometimes the difference can be very subtle. To us, to human eyes, we see people shockling, we see people being pious. V'Hashem yira la'levov. But the Rebbeinu Shalom knows what's really going on, and it's our job to be as sincere as we can. Fine. Als fein geret, all very good. Explains the pasuk, I think, nicely. Explains the halacha of honoring a Talmud Chacham nicely. But I want to come to how this connects to our preparation for Shovuos. How Yiras Shomayim ties in. So let's first make a calculation. And then following the calculation, we're going to come to an incredibly enlightening Marsha. Calculation goes like this. By all accounts, Klal Yisrael left Mitzrayim on a Thursday. 15th of Nisan was a Thursday. So if you're counting towards Shovuos on the next day, that means the first day of counting towards Shovuos was on the Friday, which was the 16th of Nisan. At the other end, we also know, according to everybody, Torah was given on Shabbos. If you count the days, that means the Machlekes in Shabbos Pei Zayin about Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, whether it was the 6th or the 7th, does not dispute this fact. It disputes what dates it was, but it doesn't dispute the number of days. The fact is we left Mitzrayim on a Thursday, and the fact is we were given Torah on a Shabbos. If you count the days between them, how many days do you get to? On what day? On what number were we given the Torah? 51. On the 51st day of counting, we were given the Torah. Asks the Marsha, a Moiradika Kasha. If we were given the Torah on the 51st day of counting after Yetzias Mitzrayim, Lama Kova Hashem Yisbarach Chag HaShavuos L'Doros B'Yom Chamishim. Why is it that we are celebrating Shavuos on the 50th day, when actually, in historic sense, we were given the Torah on the 51st? This is the Marsha in Avodah Zarah. And he answers such a powerful thing. He says, really, this is well known. Klal Yisrael, in the build-up to Har Sinai, weren't ru'oi to be makabel the Torah. We know they came out of Mitzrayim rather worse for wear, suffering from Timtum Mitzrayim, Tumas Mitzrayim. Says the Marsha, they could only be Zeicha to Torah achitaru v'yikadshu atzmo mikol Tumas Mitzrayim. They would have to purify themselves, they would have to raise the level. Like it says in the Mishnah in Avos, Kol sheyiras chetoi kudemes lechachmos zechachmos zoy miskayemes. In order for chachma to be acquired, in order for chachma to be retained, there has to be a yosoid, there has to be a foundation of Yiras Shomayim. Therefore, says the Marsha, for the entirety of the 50 days, Klal Yisrael worked and improved on themselves, and they purified themselves, and they grew in their Yiras Shomayim. The 50th day was the pinnacle of when they had finally reached a level of purity where they would be able to be makabel the Torah, a level of purity that came from increasing their Yiras Shomayim. And on the 51st day, there was Eicha to the Torah. Says the Marsha, because lefi shebayom nun b'yom chamishim nigmara haTorah, because on the 50th day, that's when they completed their purification, which enabled them to be makabel the Torah. Kova Hashem Yisbarach oisay yom chamishim lechag HaShavuos. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is kaveh l'doros, that Shavuos should be the day, not the day that we actually got the Torah. That was a day later. Shavuos should be celebrated on the day before. Ki yiras chet koidem lechokma b'maylo v'zman. Because the Yiras Shomayim that precedes the acquisition of chokma is more important in the value system than chokma itself. That's what Marsha says. Unbelievable. So we know that Shavuos is man matan Torah seinu. And of course, the Yom Tov of Shavuos is celebrating Matan Torah B'Gadol in more broad terms. Of course, that's what Shavuos is centered around. We're saying Hallel on Shavuos not because we got to the Yiras Shomayim, really. We're saying Hallel on Shavuos because we got to Kabbalah Torah. And of course, and perhaps before Shavuos we give a share on this topic, of course, every Shavuos there's a Ruach of Kabbalah Torah that is anew for all of us, absolutely every year. Of course, the theme of Shavuos is Kabbalah Torah. What the Marsha is saying, though, is in terms of timing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu timed the date of Shavuos specifically in this way for the lesson that lies within it. And the lesson is, Yiras Shomayim, if you approach Chochmah with Yiras Shomayim, you can retain the Chochmah. Without Yiras Shomayim, not a chance. In Sefer Malis Hamidus, Maila Gimel, he talks about Yiras Shomayim at great length. He brings many psukim from across Tanakh, Tehillim, Torah. You can open your eyes and see how many times Chazal spoke about Yiras Shomayim as fundamental to acquiring Chokhmah. I'll let you check it up yourself. But just interestingly, he brings in this context the story, I think it's famous, the story of Elisha ben Avuya. Elisha ben Avuya, his father, was Mechashuva Yerushalayim, says the Malis Hamidus. He was an honorable person, lived in Yerushalayim. And when he had a child, Elisha, he made a Suda, and he invited all the Chashuva Yerushalayim to come and join him. And there were people there eating and singing and dancing. And amongst them were the great Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shua. And Rabbi Eliezer turned to Rabbi Shua and said, look, all these people are doing what they do. Fine, no problem. You can sing and dance as you wish. Let's do what we do. In other words, let's learn. So they started to learn. And as they learned, fire, came down from Shomayim and surrounded them. Real fire. So Avuya, the father of the child, comes running over and says, what are you doing? You're burning my house down. So they answer him, what do you mean? We're learning Torah. And Torah was given with fire. So what are you so surprised about? There's fire? No, we're learning Torah. Of course there's fire. And Avuya was blown away. Wow, that's so cool. Says Avuya, if that's the case, I want my son to grow in Torah. Hitaka did. But he grew in Torah, that was a bit shaloi lishma. It started for the wrong reasons. Avuya invested in his son to grow in Torah because he fancied the fire around them when they learned. Not because he saw any truth, any fundamental objective in Limud Torah. Who did this Elisha turn out to be? Acher. Gemara Chagiga tells us the Baskol came down and said everyone can do tshuva except for Acher. That was the end result of this poor child. Says the Malis Hamidus. That's Torah without Yiras Shomayim. When a person doesn't have the Yesod, doesn't have the principle of Yiras Shomayim upon which they learn Torah, they end up with a Torah which serves them not very well. Only with Yiras Shomayim can a person access genuine wisdom and grow in Chokhmah, as one of the many psukim, Yiras Hashem Reishis Das. Reishis Das, the beginning of Das, Yiras Hashem. Has to be, no other way. So I feel like the gift of this pasuk that we've elaborated on today is that it has given us a real key and a real framework with which we can use to grow and to engage with the world and engage with Torah with Yiras Shomayim. Yiras Shomayim is no longer just a phrase. It's no longer just an idealistic idea. Yiras Shomayim is the definition of someone who cares about Yiddishkeit. And we must make it our business to take more interest in Torah, in mitzvahs, with Yiras Shomayim, to care what the Rebbeinu Shalom wants from us, to ask ourselves every day, what does the Rebbeinu Shalom want from me? When you're in a situation where you're not sure what the right thing to do is, it should bother you. I want to do the right thing. You don't have to obsess over it. You don't have to drive yourself in sugar, but you do have to care. And that's what it means to care with Yiras Shomayim. And if we use the time of these Sfiras Ha'omer to build on our Yiras Shomayim, we should be zeicha that Shovuos we take to be mekabel the Torah with Yirasei Kedoshim l'chachmosei shkach.